You've heard of TERFs. Now get ready for swerfs, the similarly ugly sister of TERFism is swerfism. SWERF stands for Sex Worker Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And it's right in the name, folks. These are radical feminists that exclude sex workers from their feminism. It's very rare that a swerf is not also a TERF. Technically there is a Venn diagram of TERF and swerf, but let me tell you, it's very close to being a single circle. Much like TERFs with trans women, swerfs exclude sex workers under the guise of women's liberation, and ultimately, much like TERFs, end up hurting women more than liberating women. What I didn't say about TERFs in my TERF video that, ruffled a couple TERF feathers is that, there are technically 2 or 3 types of TERFs because TERFism and swerfism alike do span all economic systems of the authoritarian political ideologies. There are liberal swerfs and there are Marxist swerfs. I hate them both just the same. And there are conservative swerfs and TERFs, but I feel like feminism isn't that much of a celebrated ideology amongst conservatives, so I think there's much less of them. I guess it could be noted that neo-liberalism is just fancy conservatism anyways, so. And because I don't know who this video is going to reach, I need to make it very clear I am not against feminism. I'm against certain feminist ideologies that claim to be radical and then spew Puritan conservative ideologies in a way where they can attempt to frame it to be liberatory towards women when it's really not. And that's where swerfism and TERFism come in. One of the things Marxist-Leninist Maoist swerfs say is, we don't hate the sex worker. We hate the sex work and the people that consume the sex work. If that's true, then call for the decriminalization of sex work. Oh, you won't do that? Yeah, exactly. The criminalization of sex work inherently puts sex workers in danger, because if something bad were to happen, sex workers literally cannot go to anyone to ask for help, because that puts them in danger of being incarcerated for their sex work. So if that truly is your stance, you better be for the decriminalization of sex work. Also, saying you hate sex workers, but that you hate the people that are keeping sex workers fed is kind of shitty. I won't lie, there are definitely some people that consume sex work that are just awful. I guess that's true for all people that consume entertainment, pleasure, etc. But there's lots of different types of sex work, and there's lots of different types of people that consume sex work, and there's lots of different types of people that do sex work. Really, being anti-consumerism with sex work, it's just an anti-porn stance in disguise. Or not even really disguised. If you ask them how they feel about porn, they just say, porn bad. Which, that's an entirely different topic that I don't agree with these feminists on as well, but, And like I said before, there's tons of different swerfs and lots of different ideologies, from liberalism, neo-liberalism, conservatism, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. So even if you claim not to exclude sex workers from your feminism, let me tell you, a neoliberal swerf already has. I've witnessed several neoliberal swerfs just straight up tell sex workers that they are agents against feminism and, help keep the patriarchy in power. There are swerfs that are a bit more bluntly swerf. You might be an incognito swerf trying to, keep your anti-sex work rhetoric in frame with keeping sex workers safe, but other swerfs are just straight up calling sex workers agents of the patriarchy. So speak for yourself, but I'm on Twitter, I see shit. And like I just said, swerfs will either use sex workers as charity pawns of their own feminist agenda, or outwardly say that they think sex workers are enemies of feminism. No matter how they frame it, they want to abolish sex work because it is sex work. Sex work is work. It is a job. We sell our bodies for, wage labor to capitalism, just like sex workers do. The only difference is the type of body selling that we are doing. Construction workers sell their bodies to build homes, buildings, etc., and put themselves in danger while doing it as well. Construction workers sell their bodies through physical labor, sex workers sell their bodies through sex. But sex work is dangerous. Yeah, it is. Lots of work where we sell our bodies is dangerous. Meatpacking plants are extremely dangerous. Let me read some stats for you. U.S. meat workers are already 3 times more likely to suffer serious injury than the average American worker, and pork and beef workers nearly 7 times more likely to suffer repetitive strain injuries. Not to mention, 2 amputations, at least, happen a week due to the meatpacking industry in the United States. And that's not, touching on what the global meatpacking industry does. And that's also not even touching on that a lot of these meatpacking workers are Mexican immigrants. But I don't see you becoming vegetarian. I don't see you denouncing animal agriculture or calling for the abolition of meatpacking jobs. If you care about dangerous work, like you're claiming to care about, then you need to be consistent with that, don't you think? I take an anti-work position, so no matter what I do here, my views on this remain unhypocritical. I want to minimize the concept of work as much as possible and eventually, hopefully, get to abolition of work. Hopefully, in post, I can put some reading that you can do if that confuses you in any way, but I digress. I don't focus solely on sex work abolition like it's a special case. If you want to abolish sex work, then I suggest remaining consistent with your ideology and start advocating for the abolition of other dangerous jobs, such as meatpacking, construction, mining, etc. You also better not be a Marxist that, when I say abolish the military, you're like, so true. But then I'm like, that includes the Chinese military, and you're like, but my state capitalism. You better remain consistent with the ideology that you want to abolish dangerous work if that's going to be your reasoning as to why you're anti-sex work. They also like to say that supporting sex work is supporting human trafficking. No, sex work and sex slavery are 2 very different things. One of these things is mostly voluntary. Sometimes it's like a last resort type work, but we've all been there. There's lots of people that have to do jobs they don't want to do as a last resort option. Sex slavery means that they've been forced into the industry, and that they likely don't make any money off of it. I'm against human trafficking, obviously, and I think it's a great example of how both sex work and other forms of labor are both greatly dangerous and, exploited. As of 2017, the statistics say only 19% of human trafficking is sex trafficking. The rest of it is labor trafficking. I think that just goes to show that, sex is not the only exploited job or forced work that might exist, but they're objectifying themselves. It's against feminism. Once again, we objectify ourselves every day by continuing to engage in wage labor under capitalism. You are literally being treated like a work robot, but of course, they're objectifying themselves. You could argue that models are objectifying themselves as they're just a pretty face to sell a product. You could say the same thing for entertainers of all kinds, especially considering they're literally selling their personality. My point is, yes, they are objectifying themselves, but that tends to happen often with lots of jobs with wage labor under capitalism. Remain consistent in your ideologies, please, if you're going to be fucking weird on the internet. All in all, it just seems like swerfs have, internalized ideas about sex as influenced by, Puritan Western society, and they're taking it out on sex workers. They believe sex is sacred and not something to sell. They hide behind the claims that they're worried about the dangers of sex work, and then they don't apply that same thought process to other dangerous work, leaving their arguments hypocritical and null. To make it very clear, I do want to abolish sex work, but not because it's sex work, because it's work. I don't think anyone should have to sell their bodies to capitalism, or to the state. I'm looking at you, Marxist-Leninist Maoists. I denounce human trafficking, no shit, and I feel for all the workers across the world, or more appropriately enslaved people across the world, that are being exploited for their bodies, sex work or not. But until we can destroy wage labor and work, I will support sex workers and be against the criminalization of sex work. I'll treat them like, human beings instead of pawns in your little radical feminist game. Radical feminist. I always find it funny that they call themselves radical when they just spout conservative views repackaged to, push an agenda. Anyways, all in all, sex workers are workers, and I'm anti-SWERF, if you can't tell already. Can't wait for the English major TERFs to write 6 essays in my fucking comments section. That one's gonna be fun.